Marcus Reynolds stood at the edge of his property, watching the sunset paint the lake in brilliant oranges and purples. The sprawling 5-acre waterfront estate had been his life's work for nearly 2 decades. What had once been a decrepit fishing cabin with overgrown grounds was now Lakeside Haven, a boutique resort featuring 6 luxury cabins, a private beach, and amenities that attracted visitors from across the country willing to pay premium rates for the exclusive experience. A sound of tires on gravel pulled his attention away from the view. A black SUV with Pinnacle Estates HOA emblazoned on the door rolled to a stop, and a woman in her 50s emerged, clutching a leather portfolio. Marcus recognized her immediately. Barbara Whitfield, the newly elected president of the Homeowners Association that governed the neighboring luxury development. "Mr. Reynolds," she called out, her voice sharp as she picked her way across the manicured lawn in impractical heels. "I'm glad I caught you. We need to discuss some concerns." Marcus fought to keep his expression neutral. He'd been expecting this visit since the development's expansion had been announced last month. The Pinnacle Estates HOA had been trying to absorb his property for years, claiming his resort lowered property values despite all evidence to the contrary. "Barbara," he nodded politely, "what can I do for you this evening?" She thrust a document toward him. "This is a formal notice that your property is in violation of covenant restrictions. Your continued operation of a commercial enterprise is expressly prohibited by our bylaws." Marcus didn't take the paper. "Barbara, we've been through this before. My property predates your development by over 30 years. I'm not part of your HOA, and I never signed any covenant agreement." "That's where you're mistaken," she replied with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "When Pinnacle acquired the adjacent lands last year, it triggered a reassessment of all property lines. Our legal team has determined that the Lakeside Haven Resort is now officially within our jurisdiction." Marcus felt his blood pressure rising but kept his voice steady. "That's not how property law works, and you know it. I've never signed any agreement with your AOA." Barbara's smile tightened. "We've voted. The board has determined you have 90 days to cease all commercial operations and convert the property back to single-family residential use. Alternatively, you can sell to our approved developer at the assessed residential value." She paused. "I should mention they're offering a very generous 20% above that assessment." Marcus did the quick math in his head. His resort generated nearly $800,000 in annual revenue. The generous offer would be pennies on the dollar compared to the actual value of his business. "This property has been my home and livelihood for 18 years, Marcus said, his calm exterior masking growing fury. "I've invested everything I have into building this resort." "Well," Barbara said, examining her manicured nails, "you should have read the fine print when you purchased in a covenant-restricted area." "I didn't purchase in your covenant-restricted area," Marcus replied. "Your development expanded around me. The board's decision is final," Barbara said, dropping the notice at his feet when he refused to take it. 90 days, Mr. Reynolds. After that, the fines begin at $500 per day. I'm sure someone with your limited resources wouldn't want that burden." As she turned to leave, she added over her shoulder, "The Westbrooks offer won't stay open forever. I'd take it if I were you. Fighting this will only cost you money you don't have." Marcus watched her drive away, the paper at his feet fluttering in the evening breeze. The mention of the Westbrooks confirmed his suspicions. The wealthy family had been trying to acquire his property for years to build their own private compound on the lake. He picked up the notice, his jaw set with determination. They thought he would roll over, intimidated by their money and connections. They assumed he lacked the resources to fight back. What they didn't know was that Marcus Reynolds had been preparing for this battle for years, and he had no intention of surrendering what was rightfully his. As darkness fell over the lake, Marcus walked back to his main cabin, already mentally composing an email to his attorney. The HOA had just declared war, but they had no idea what they were up against. 3 days after Barbara Whitfield's visit, Marcus sat in the wood-paneled office of Diana Chen, the best property rights attorney in the state. Her downtown office offered panoramic views of the city, but neither of them was admiring the scenery. Instead, they were focused on the stack of documents spread across the conference table. "This is ridiculous," Diana said, pushing her glasses up on her nose as she reviewed the HOA's notice. "They're setting a boundary reassessment that was never filed with the county. And even if it had been, it wouldn't automatically place your pre-existing property under their jurisdiction." She looked up at Marcus. "How long has this been going on?" "They've been making noise since they broke ground on Phase 2 about 5 years ago," Marcus replied. "But this is the first time they've issued a formal violation notice." Diana nodded, making notes. "I suspect it's because of your recent expansion permit approval. The timing isn't coincidental." Marcus had recently secured approval to add 4 more luxury cabins and a wellness center to Lakeside Haven, which would nearly double his revenue. The permit had been featured in the local business journal just weeks before. "What about the Westbrooks?" Marcus asked. Barbara mentioned them by name. Diana's expression hardened. Richard Westbrook sits on the HOA board, despite not actually living in the development yet. His investment company owns the majority of the undeveloped plots. She tapped her pen against the table. This has his fingerprints all over it. So what's our next move? Marcus asked, leaning forward. First, we send a cease and desist, making it clear that you reject their claim of jurisdiction and will not be shutting down your business. Diana began typing on her laptop. Then we file for an emergency injunction to prevent them from imposing any fines or taking any action against your property. And if that doesn't work? Diana gave him a rare smile. Then we go on offense. I've been reviewing your property's history. Did you know that your access road actually contains a historical easement that several Pinnacle properties depend on for their lake access? Marcus frowned. I knew there was an easement, but I've never restricted anyone's access. Exactly, Diana replied. You've been more than accommodating, but legally you could require proper documentation and reasonable maintenance fees for use of that easement. She closed her laptop with a decisive click. We're not going to do that yet, but it's good to know what cards we're holding. 2 weeks later, Marcus received notice that the HOA had rejected his attorney's cease and desist letter and was proceeding with their action against Lakeside Haven. The same day, he discovered that someone had posted dozens of one-star reviews on various travel sites, all with similar wording claiming his resort was unsafe and unsanitary. They're trying to damage your business reputation while the legal battle proceeds, Diana explained during their phone call. It's a classic intimidation tactic. They want to drain your resources and force you to sell. Well, it's not working, Marcus replied, watching from his office window as a family checked into cabin 3, returning for their 5th annual visit. Bookings are actually up since last month. My regular guests know these reviews are bogus. Nevertheless, we should document everything. This could constitute tortious interference with your business. The situation escalated a week later when Marcus arrived at his resort to find a construction crew blocking his entrance with heavy equipment. A man in a hard hat approached his car window. Sorry, sir. This area is closed for infrastructure work ordered by the Pinnacle Estates of HOA. Marcus spotted Barbara Whitfield standing near an SUV, watching the confrontation with a satisfied expression. He reversed his car and called Diana. Within 2 hours, a county sheriff and a judge's order had removed the construction crew. By afternoon, the local news had picked up the story. Local resort owner battles aggressive HOA tactics. That evening, as Marcus was updating his resort's social media with a carefully worded statement about the situation, he received an unexpected visitor. A Tesla pulled into his driveway and a man in his 30s, dressed casually but in clothes that Marcus recognized as expensive, stepped out. Mr. Reynolds, I'm Alex Westbrook, Richard's son. He held up his hands when he saw Marcus' expression harden. I'm not here on family business. In fact, my father doesn't know I'm here. Marcus crossed his arms. What do you want? To apologize, first of all, Alex said, looking genuinely uncomfortable, and to give you some information that might help your case. Marcus studied the younger man carefully. Why would you do that? This is even bigger than we thought, Diana said, spreading the documents Alex Westbrook had provided across her conference table. It was 2 days after his unexpected visit, and Marcus had spent the intervening time making copies and securing the originals in a safe deposit box. Marcus leaned forward, studying a map of the lake region with color-coded sections, so that the HOA was never actually after my resort for property values. Oh, they want your property, Diana confirmed, but not for the reasons they claimed. According to these documents, Richard Westbrook and 3 members of the county zoning board have been quietly acquiring properties around the lake for the past 4 years through various shell companies. She pointed to the map. Once they control these key parcels, including yours, they plan to push through a massive rezoning that would allow for a 300-unit luxury condominium development, a private marina, and a members-only golf course. Marcus whistled. That would completely transform the character of the lake. The environmental impact alone would be devastating. Exactly. Which is why they've been keeping it quiet and doing the acquisitions gradually. Diana shuffled through more papers. The emails Alex provided show they've already secured preliminary approval from certain county officials, approval that was never made public and appears to have been obtained through some questionable incentives. Bribes, Marcus said flatly. Let's call them undisclosed conflicts of interest for now, Diana replied with a grim smile. But yes, essentially. So what's our next move? Diana gathered the documents into organized piles. We have 2 tracks. First, we use this information as leverage in your specific case against the HOA. Their entire jurisdictional claim is built on fraudulent documents, and we now have proof. And the second track. We take this evidence of corruption to the state attorney general's office. Diana's expression was deadly serious. This goes beyond your property dispute, Marcus. We're looking at potential violations of open meetings laws, ethics violations by public officials, and possibly criminal conspiracy charges. Alex mentioned his father has political connections at the state level too, Marcus cautioned. That's why we need to build an airtight case before we move. Diana nodded toward the documents. And why we need to protect our source. If Richard Westbrook learns his son provided these documents. The implications hung in the air between them. 3 days later, Marcus received a certified letter from the Pinnacrist Estates HOA. It contained a settlement offer. They would generously extend his compliance deadline by 6 months if he signed an acknowledgement accepting their jurisdiction over his property. Instead of responding directly, Diana filed their countersuit the following morning. By afternoon, local news outlets were reporting that the owner of Lakeside Haven Resort was suing the Pinnacrist Estates HOA for $3.7 million in damages for harassment, tortious interference with business relationships, abuse of process, and attempted fraud. The reaction was swift. Barbara Whitfield called a press conference, standing in front of the Pinnacrist Estates entrance with several board members flanking her. These absurd allegations are nothing more than the desperate actions of a business owner who refuses to comply with legitimate community standards, she told the assembled reporters. Mr. Reynolds has been operating a commercial enterprise in a residential zone for years, creating noise, traffic, and environmental concerns for surrounding property owners. But her confident demeanor cracked when a reporter asked about the specific allegations of document fraud mentioned in the lawsuit. Those claims they're completely fabricated, she stammered. The Pinnacrist Estates HOA operates with full transparency and strict adherence to all legal requirements. The camera caught Richard Westbrook scowling in the background before he abruptly walked away from the press conference. That evening, Marcus received a call from an unlisted number. The storage locker contained a treasure trove that exceeded Marcus's expectations. Inside were boxes of financial records, private meeting minutes, and a laptop. Diana brought in a digital forensics expert who discovered the laptop contained years of emails between Richard Westbrook and various county officials, including discussions of kickbacks disguised as consulting fees and detailed plans for manipulating property values around the lake. This is unprecedented, Diana told Marcus as they reviewed the findings in her office. With this evidence, we're not just looking at civil damages anymore. The state attorney general is talking about potential RICO charges. Marcus looked up sharply. Racketeering? Isn't that usually for organized crime? The law applies to any organization engaged in a pattern of illegal activity, Diana explained. What Westbrook and his associates were doing, using the HOA as a vehicle for fraud, manipulation of government processes, and possible extortion, fits the definition. Their conversation was interrupted when Diana's assistant burst in without knocking. You need to see this, she said, turning on the office television to the local news channel. The breaking news banner read, Fire at Lakeside Haven Resort. Aerial footage showed smoke billowing from one of the cabins. Marcus was on his feet instantly. I have to go. I'm coming with you, Diana said, already grabbing her coat. This is not a coincidence. By the time they arrived at the resort, fire crews had contained the blaze to a single cabin, but the damage was extensive. The fire chief met them as they pulled up. We managed to keep it from spreading, he explained, but cabin 2 is a total loss. Fortunately, it was unoccupied. How did it start? Marcus asked, his voice tight. The fire chief's expression darkened. That's why I wanted to speak with you directly. This was no accident. We found evidence of an accelerant and what appears to be a delayed ignition device. The police are treating this as arson. Marcus thought immediately of Richard Westbrook's threat. Diane was already on her phone speaking rapidly to someone about an emergency restraining order. As they stood surveying the damage, a police detective approached them. Mr. Reynolds, we found something you should see. Near the edge of the property, partially burned but still legible, was a crudely made sign. Exceed the of or lose it all. The detective took photos and bagged the sign as evidence. We'll check it for fingerprints, but I'm not optimistic. This looks premeditated. Marcus turned to Diana. I want to move ahead with everything we have. Today. Within hours, Diana had filed their complete evidence package with the state attorney general's office and submitted an expanded lawsuit naming Richard Westbrook personally, along with 3 county officials implicated in the documents from the storage locker. By evening, the story had gone national. A major news network ran a feature on HOA corruption and abuse of power, using Lakeside Haven as their prime example. Former residents of other developments where Westbrook had been involved came forward with similar stories of intimidation and fraud. The next morning, state police officers arrived at Richard Westbrook's mansion with arrest warrants for conspiracy, fraud, and evidence tampering. But Westbrook was nowhere to be found. His private jet had departed for the Cayman Islands the previous night. Barbara Whitfield wasn't so fortunate. Cameras captured her being escorted from her home in handcuffs, a coat draped over her head to shield her face. 2 other HOA board members and a county commissioner were also taken into custody. While the legal machinery ground forward, Marcus faced the daunting task of rebuilding the destroyed cabin and reassuring his guests that Lakeside Haven was still open for business. To his surprise, the community rallied around him. Local contractors offered discounted services for the rebuild. Neighboring businesses sent their customers his way. The Save Our Lake environmental group organized volunteers to help with landscaping and cleanup. Marissa Tompkins, the leader of the suspended HOA board's opposition faction, arrived at the resort one afternoon with a proposal. The homeowners took a vote, she explained as they walked along the lakeshore. We want to formally dissolve any claim of jurisdiction over your property and issue a public apology for the actions of the previous board. Marcus was surprised. That's unexpected. It's the right thing to do, Marissa said simply. Most of us bought into Pinnacrist because we love the lake and the natural setting. What Westbrook and the others were planning would have destroyed everything that made this area special. She paused, and many of us have enjoyed dinner at your restaurant or recommended your cabins to visiting family. Your resort has never been the problem they claimed it was. 1 year later, Marcus stood on the deck of the newly constructed wellness center, watching guests enjoy the pristine lake on a perfect summer day. The past 12 months had been transformative for Lakeside Haven. Where Cabin 2 had once stood, now rose an expanded luxury accommodation with a private hot tub and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. The resort had added 4 new cabins as originally planned, and bookings were solid for the next 18 months. Quite a view, isn't it? Diana said, joining him at the railing. She had stopped by to deliver news in person rather than over the phone. Best office in the world, Marcus agreed. What's the verdict? Diana handed him a sealed envelope. See for yourself. Marcus opened it and scanned the official court document, then let out a low whistle. $1.1 million. The judge awarded the full amount, plus legal fees, Diana added with satisfaction. Judge Carmichael was particularly impressed by the evidence of the systematic fraud and conspiracy. Her written opinion basically eviscerates Westbrook and the former HOA board. The final tally was staggering. Beyond Marcus's direct damages, the court had assessed punitive damages that brought the total judgment to $1.1 million, funds that would come from the frozen assets of Richard Westbrook and the former Pinnacrist Estates HOA board members. What are the criminal cases? Marcus asked. Barbara Whitfield and 2 other board members accepted plea deals in exchange for testimony against Westbrook and the county officials, Diana explained. They'll serve probation and pay substantial fines. The commissioner who approved the fraudulent rezoning plans is looking at 5 to 7 years. And Westbrook himself. Diana's smile was cold. The extradition filing went through last month. He's facing multiple federal charges including wire fraud, conspiracy, and attempted witness intimidation. His lawyers are scrambling, but the prosecutor is confident. He's looking at 15 to 20 years. Marcus shook his head, still processing the magnitude of their victory. When I built this place, all I wanted was a quiet business by the lake. I never imagined I'd end up taking down a criminal enterprise. Speaking of the business, Diana said, how's your new marketing director working out? They both looked across the lawn where Alex Westbrook was leading a group of guests on an ecology tour of the lakeshore. Since joining Lakeside Haven 6 months ago, he had revitalized their marketing approach, focusing on environmental sustainability and creating an online presence that had doubled their website traffic. He's been a revelation, Marcus admitted. Hard to believe he's Richard's son. Sometimes the best redemption comes from rejecting your parents' worst qualities, Diana observed, and he certainly seems committed to making amends. Indeed, beyond his work at the resort, Alex had established a legal fund for homeowners who had been defrauded by his father's various development schemes across the state. His testimony had been crucial in both the civil and criminal proceedings. The environmental protection designation goes into effect next month, doesn't it? Diana asked. Marcus nodded. The entire lake and surrounding waters. No large-scale development will ever be permitted. The Save Our Lake Coalition made it happen. I just provided the meeting space. In the aftermath of the scandal, the grassroots environmental group had leveraged public outrage to secure permanent protections for the lake ecosystem. What had begun as a defense against one corrupt HOA had evolved into a model conservation success story, with Lakeside Haven as its centerpiece. Later that afternoon, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Marcus hosted a gathering on the main deck. Resort guests mingled with local residents and members of the reformed Pinnacrist Estates Homeowners Association, now led by Marissa Tompkins with a commitment to transparency and community service. Marcus tapped a glass to get everyone's attention. A year ago, I wasn't sure Lakeside Haven would survive, he began. Today, we're not just surviving, we're thriving. And it's because all of you recognize that what makes this place special isn't just the buildings or amenities, but the natural beauty we're privileged to share. He gestured toward the lake where a pair of ospreys circled above the water. The court's final judgment was delivered today. Justice has been served against those who tried to exploit this land for personal gain.